Chapter 5. Growing Up Years Like a Bouncing Ball. Part of growing up is just taking what you learn from that and moving on and not taking it to heart. Beverly Mitchell. 1949 was one of the most unforgettable years of Tony Pizarro's youth. He was enrolled at the Cayetano Arellano Elementary School, about a mile away from their house in Orphan, Bataan. The school was named after a native of the place who rose to become the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Still very young then, Tony remembers rushing to get ready for school, putting his shirt on, and picking up his books and papers without having breakfast most of the time. He would pass by the store of his Auntie Rita Almazan, a distant relative, who would call out to Tony and tell him to tuck in his shirt and comb his hair. She and her family were very nice to the young Tony. At lunch break, he would come home from school very hungry. There was nobody at home, and with no refrigeration at that time, people would put their food inside a basket hanging from the ceiling to prevent cats from eating it. Most of the time, the basket was empty, and since there were no elders from whom he could ask money to buy food, he would content himself eating his usual staple of rice sprinkled with salt and water to appease his hunger. His mother must have been rolling in her grave knowing the young son she left behind was being neglected. When Tony was in second grade in 1950, his Auntie Liwanag de la Cruz, a step-sister of his mother, visited them in Orphan, Bataan. At that time, she lived with her husband, Juanito de la Cruz, in Rosario, Cavite, which was near the U.S. Naval Station at Sangley Point, Cavite City. Her husband, Juanito, was with the U.S. Navy and assigned to the base. They lived with their 6 children. Kuya, masyado atang marami kayo dito sa bahay. Elder brother, it seems there are a lot of you living in this house, she told Tony's father. Would you like me to take one of your children to ease your burden of raising them all up? Tony's father agreed. Since Tony was the youngest of the brood, he was picked. Tony was not even asked whether he wanted to live with his Auntie Liwanag's family in Rosario, Cavite. He had no choice, as it was the elders who made the decision for him. At that time in the 1950s, he was just a young boy who could be passed on from one family to another. The decision was not explained to him. He was just told to pack whatever limited clothing he had, and he then boarded a bus with his Auntie Liwanag bound for Metro Manila, where they changed buses for Cavite. For a young boy separated from the only family he knew, it was heartbreaking. Somehow the pain was eased by the fact the father, brothers, and only sister he was leaving behind neither had the time nor energy to attend to his everyday needs. He felt that living with his Auntie Liwanag and her family might not be for the better, but at least there's an adventure and a chance his situation might be improved. It was the first time Tony left his hometown in Orphan, Bataan. The year was 1951. The bus ride from Bataan to Manila was 3 hours long, but interesting because of all the new sights. He was pleased to see the big city, fascinated by its tall buildings, crowded streets, and amazed by the large number of people walking around. From the Bataan bus terminal to Manila, they boarded a jeepney that took them to the Cavite bus terminal at the southern part of the city. As he sat by the bus window with the wind blowing against his face, he was eager to experience the new life that awaited him. Rosario, Cavite was no different from the Orphan town he left behind. It had similar homes with corrugated roofs and nipa huts huddled on both sides of the main road, with trees adorning the yards. The locals lived with the transplants that arrived in the area from all parts of the Philippines to work at the U.S. Naval Base, the largest employer in the place. Linguistically, he was in his element, as Tagalog, his native tongue in Bataan, was also spoken in there. He was enrolled at the Rosario Elementary School, which he attended starting in 1951 when he was 11 years old until he turned 13 in 1953. The school was 10 miles away from Barrio Wawa where they lived. He had to walk, rain or shine, to school and back, as there was hardly any other mode of transportation available except the occasional horse-pulled carretela. Besides, he had barely had an allowance for food, much less transportation fare. Nonetheless, he was very grateful to his Auntie Liwanag and her husband Siaho Juanito. They were kind and supportive of his education. In gratitude, Tony assumed the responsibility for babysitting their youngest son, Fred, who was then 3 years old, after he came home from school. Years later, when Tony was already a successful businessman, he met Fred, whom he called Boy. His ward was now an adult and had done a 4-year stint in the U.S. Army. He was living in National City, California, where Tony has properties. Siaho, as I called Uncle Johnny or Juanito de la Cruz, and his wife Auntie Liwanag, had opened their home and were good to me. They gave me food, shelter, and education. They were gracious enough, and I had been grateful to them for giving me an opportunity to learn more about life. It was again at this moment that I paused to see myself and dream someday to carve a better life and future for myself. I owed them a lot, Tony remembers. Because of them, I learned to be independent, strong, and ambitious. While living with the family, who by then had 7 children, Tony realized he should help them in return by doing household chores like cleaning the house, scrubbing the floor, and fetching water voluntarily and without being told. Never once did they tell me of things to do because I knew what was expected of me. In return, they complimented me for my efforts. In 1953, when 2 of Tony's brothers, Ernie and Ernesto, had left home to join the U.S. Navy, the family thought there was enough room in their household and resources to take him back to his hometown Orphan, Bataan. His elder brothers promised to take care of his education. He stayed with his second eldest brother, Elpidio, whom he called Tico Pedio. By then, Pedio had gotten married to Amelia Canaria, Insong Eming, to Tony of Dang Balolo, Orphan, Bataan. In 1954, Tony attended 6th grade at the same Arellano Elementary School where he started his formal elementary education. After his elementary school graduation in 1954, Tony's brother Dionisio entered the U.S. Navy. Tony then lived with his Auntie Isabel, a younger sister of his father, with his sister Ada, together with 4 other nephews and nieces from 2 families, in San Vicente, Orphan, Bataan, until 1958. I have to give much credit to my Auntie Isabel, who, despite being single, was very able to help others in need by taking care of the other kids of her brothers. Some of my childhood friends then, Tony remembers, were Fred Alarcon, Dr. Angelito Baluyot, Vic Magat, Renato Pangilinan, Renato Matawaran, Pepe Barag, Renato Vilazor, Abraham Apolinario, Junior Quicho, and Polding Navarro. The day in August 1954 when Tony Pizarro enrolled for his high school education at the Jose Rizal Institute, named after the country's national hero, was a significant moment in his life. It was the day his name was unceremoniously changed from Tolentino to Florentino. The culprit was Tony's own Auntie Mariquita Raimundo, a cousin of his father, who was then a Filipino language teacher there. She was also in charge of the students' registration. "Ang pangit naman ng pangalan mo, your name is so ugly," she said when he approached her desk. "Tolentino is not appropriate for you. People might call you Tole, a circumcised person, and you would end up the butt of the jokes of your fellow students. Let's change it to a better-sounding name like Florentino so people could also call you Tino." Tony, who was told to be obedient to elders, liked the idea and agreed. Hence, his name was changed for good without seeking the approval of his father or registering the change of name in the municipal hall. It seemed it could be done since the records of names in the birth registry had been burned during the Japanese occupation in the Second World War. It would not be the last time Tony would change his name. When he arrived in the United States in May of 1959, the American movie actor Tony Curtis was very popular. He thought by changing his nickname to Tony instead of Tino, he would become as successful as his movie idol. And so, throughout his military and civilian career, he introduced himself as Tony. When Tony Pizarro's elder brother Ernesto was called to join the U.S. Navy, he happened to be sick with asthma. The opportunity was too good to be wasted, as people eagerly waited for months for the chance to be called. So, his younger brother Dionisio reported to the recruiting office in Cavite instead, and introduced himself as Ernesto. He was lucky enough to pass the exams, but had to carry the name of his elder brother during his active duty. Fortunately, he was later able to change his name to Ernie. Later on, when Dionisio's name was called, Ernesto reported in his place. Truly, Ernesto did not live up to his name, but, as Shakespeare said, all's well that ends well. Tony Pizarro remembers his high school teachers as Mr. Ruben Roxas, Miss Mariquita Raimundo, Mr. Florentino Simeon, Mr. Alfredo Angelis, Miss Josefa Angeles, Mr. Manuel Soriano, and Mr. Abelardo Minardo. These teachers, according to him, had a tremendous influence on his life as Tony intently listened each day to their words of wisdom. Tony did well in high school. He was elected class president each year and named the most serviceable person of the year in 1956. From 1957 to 1958, his senior year, Tony was elected president of the Student Council and handpicked by Mr. Andres Buenaventura, the school's preparatory military training instructor, PMT, as battalion commander. He was also with the school's champion debate team, as well as the winner of the school's oratorical contest. His winning piece? Jose Rizal's classic poem, My Last Farewell. He graduated from high school in March 1958. Somehow, Tony managed to do well in school at this point of his life, despite feeling like a bouncing ball, one who was passed around from one family member to another. He had no permanent roots. As a high school graduate, he did not know yet what the next chapter of his life would be.